So the next thing we're going to look at is JavaScript and forms. And so I'm going to open up my page here. Let me close all these and make a new page. So under my www root, we'll add a new page and HTML, and we'll call this input form.html. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a form. So the form tag basically has an action. And the action is, in this case, we're going to send it to a page called response.html that will be on this page, on this site. And we can specify a method. Until we get into learning server-side coding, the only thing we can really do is a get method. We could ping some APIs that are out there, but as far as using things that we've built, we're going to use a get. But there are several methods. You have get, post. There's also put and a number of others, which we make more sense to go over when we're talking about server-side code. So until you have server-side code, everything's a get. The field set tag basically just lets HTML format this as a field set, and we're going to put a number of inputs. And there's a lot of different types of inputs: checkboxes, date times, radio buttons, text, and they work, very similar to any form program that you've used. We're just going to use a simple text box for this example. Now, when you're working with forms, it's very important to set the name attribute of your inputs. And that's because if you don't do that, then HTML has no way of associating a key for the key value. So really, your inputs eventually end up becoming key value pairs. And so we'll start off, we'll make the starting value of this form be a 0, and we'll make another one. So I've got my two inputs, first num and second num, and then I'm going to have another input and this is going to be a submit. And let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to hit Control F5 and render this. And we go to this new page that we created, which is input form. And we have a form. Notice that we didn't use a button here. We used an input, but it rendered as a button. So the input, the submit input, is something that will go to a page. Now, we didn't build this page yet, but notice when I click the button, some interesting things happen. First of all, it went to response.html. But after that, we see that it added on the submit a question mark, first num equals 6, and second num equals 8. So what is this first? Where did it get this first num? Well, that was the name of the first input. So you can see that this is called the query string. And the query string begins with a question mark. And then it's a series of key value pairs separated by equal signs and ampersand signs. So the keys are the names of the input fields, and the values are the values. So I put 6 and 8 into first num and second num, and so that's what we got here. And so we got all these key value pairs that comes back. So how do we get that and use that in our code? Well, let's this purpose of this form is to send information to another form. Now, this isn't always the way you would do it. Sometimes you wouldn't use a form. Here you would actually, process it with a button and not send it to a form. Here you could just use a button, but here the reason to use the form is to go to another page. So we're going to add another page, and we'll call this response.html. And in the response, what we're going to do is let's put a paragraph, and we'll put a span tag, and we'll set an ID for the span tag. Remember, IDs are unique per page, so we use them a lot in JavaScript. And then we're going to put our script tag here at the end, and use our document get element by ID query string. Make sure this is spelled the same, otherwise I won't find it. Let's use enter text this time. Is equal to window.location.href. So window.location.href, what's that? Well, we'll find out when we run this, because it's going to take this and place it in this query string. So we'll run that, and we'll go to our input form first, 55 and 77, submit. Well, that's the whole URL. So the location.href, that's what came in here. So that's the request, basically, or the URL for the request. So and our data is in here. How do we extract it out of here? There's a couple ways, actually. So I'm going to show the more primitive ways first. And so this is W3 docs. They have they show here a function. Or show a way that gets the query string values. Let's see. Actually, this one isn't great. Let's see if we can find something that gives us. Truth is, I don't use this much because I'm normally using Blazor, or I'm using some other framework which does it for me. So, but this is just to learn how to use JavaScript by itself. So here's an example. They have a little function here that parses a query string, and there is a URL parameter search class. Maybe we'll try that first. And let's see. So the way this params one works is we have our query string. Actually, I think I like this article better. It seems like it site point, get URL parameters from JavaScript. This seems to be a cleaner example of how to do it. So I'm gonna walk through this one piece by piece. I'm gonna fix my spelling here. And let's do this. Let's say constant query string. I'll just use this as my print. Window dot location dot search. And let's see what we get for query string. And cool. So the search attribute brings you back just the query string. And then once we have that, what we can do is we can say params is equal to new URL search params query string. And relatively new thing in relatively, it's been a while for a while, but in JavaScript is the addition of classes. And so here we are instantiating a URL search parameters class. And that, of course, why do we have classes? So we can use their properties and methods to do things. Well, one of the things that our URL search parameters class allows us to do is use a get method. And so we could do this. Get, and what were the values? First num, right? And let's see if that works. I'm going to build this, and then let's see, can I just refresh this? Yeah, it got the first one, 55. So now I could let's see if it can get second num. And sure enough, we can get the second number. So now we have this convenient way of getting our numbers. And, you know, I could do this. So that I could maybe shorten things, make it easier to see what's going on. And then I could say something like num1 plus two let's see, is it going to do that? I got an error. Params is not a function. Oh, forgot my .get. Params is the class. We need .get. So, yeah. now we can see, these are likely strings at this point. So when we add that, so now I'm just displaying this, and then I could maybe do this plus equals. I'm going to hit F6 and build this. Refresh this. Yep. So now we have equals, and now we need the answer. So how do we get the answer? Well, conveniently, in our JavaScript, if I bring in this JavaScript file, we have my function. Not really well named, but it'll do. Is equal to my function, and we'll pass in num1 and num2. And then here we can pass in the result. Let's see what happens. And it worked. So now you have a, the basic methodology for how to make a form and pass the values through the query string to another page, and then put some JavaScript on that page to do some work. And and then once again, is this a good structure? Well, yeah, the script here is basically just doing form manipulation stuff. So this is solidly view type stuff. We're not really doing any domain logic here. Just philosophically, our JavaScript has the function which is, just more generically doing stuff for us, so we're not putting that complexity in the script. And stuff that might be common in multiple forms is in here. Some cleanup, comments. Yeah, you should be doing this type of stuff. So that's how you do your comments here. You can put comments in your page. One thing too is I always forget, what the how to comment something. Nice thing is if you remember the shortcut for commenting, which is Control-K, Control-C, it'll do it for you. So this is, and then it's not unusual to do stuff like this. When you get much more complex JavaScript, be able to section off, pages, especially when you start having dialogues and everything show up. Being able to section them off that way really makes it easier to find out what's going on. So I recommend putting, comments and then an end comment show to block off what's going on. I mean, obviously your script tag isn't bad, but sometimes this makes it easy to kind of corral everything together and figure out where stuff is. And then you can now realize your comments do show up with in the browser if someone looks at the source code. So you may not want to do this. Simply because you now open yourself up to being a spam target because you put your email right out there in the thing that's out in the open. So normally this becomes much more restricted to, whatever the name of your company is. It's usually just a copyright statement. And not much else. Again, because you don't want your email to be visible just out there where a web crawler is going to grab it and start spamming you. Not that they won't get it anyway, but it just, why make it easy? So, any case, we'll see though in Blazor, we can actually put comments in here that will not show up in the other pages. So, in any case, that's basically how you can make a form and get a response. And of course, then you can add more links and go back and forth. And pretty much you could make a full application with that. You just can't store state very well at this stage and at this point in time. But we'll talk about that once we get a server-side code, and we'll use our server-side code primarily to store data. So thank you very much.